Hey everybody, Scoutcrafter here again. It's Wednesday. Everything's going outstanding over here at the shop. Got a couple things to talk about today. I was, I woke up this morning. I was kind of, thinking about my grandmother years ago when she was alive. She was a great gal, that one, and she taught me a lot. But, I was thinking about the things that she taught me, so many things in Proverbs. Proverbs... little sayings like a stitch in time saves nine, or don't put all your eggs in one basket. When we're kids, they say things, these proverbs to us, grandparents and whatnot. We don't really pay attention or understand exactly what they mean. We hear them, but, it's not until later on that you realize the genius behind these proverbs, and I found a list of 150 of them, the most common ones, and I'm going to include it in the link in the description. So if you know any other proverb that you grew up with that isn't in there, just put it in the link, because I love proverbs. They're genius. Whoever thought of some of these are just, like the grass is always greener on the other side of the fence. I mean, that makes so much sense when you get older. You say, yeah, I understand that. Or don't put all your eggs, like I said before, in one basket, or there's plenty of fish in the sea. Remember that one? These things do help you out in life. And I said, you could actually get an education just from Proverbs. So if you know any that aren't on that list of 150 that I'm including, put it in the description, because we can all learn something from a good proverb. With that, today, a couple things I have to take care of down the shop. And I said I was going to talk about sharpening real quick, not to go crazy, because I know it ruffles a lot of feathers when you talk about sharpening or anything bushcraft. Bushcraft, are you familiar with the term bushcraft? Because years ago we used to call it camping. Remember pre-YouTube, before YouTube, when we used to go camping, we used to grab a tent, a sleeping bag, go out in the woods. It's not that way anymore. It's called bushcraft. And these bushcraft guys, they go out with their expensive gear, and they make feather sticks, and they use ferro rods all day. That's what they do. Feather sticks and ferro rods. Forget about learning to find tinder or kindling. They don't know. They go right to the feather sticks and ferro rod. So it's a whole different world if you're camping, and like homeless people have been camping for forever. I don't get it. Anyway, so let's get to it. Now, I promised a while back that we were going to do an episode on adhesives, and we will be getting to that shortly. But on this knife that we did a couple weeks ago, Abe's knife, that I made the little keeper here. You see, now what you have to be careful of is that the back of the keeper, the snap, when it presses against wood, eventually you do it 50, 60 times, you start to make a little indentation or something there. So he pointed out you should put a piece of leather and glue a piece of leather onto the back here. So this way it cushions it when you push this down, that you don't have to worry about it damaging the handle of your knife, which is a great idea, and I'm going to do that today. But for the glue that I wanted to choose for this, I want to use an epoxy, and I'll tell you why. Of all the glues I have, epoxy has always come through for me. Now, one thing you can't argue with is how great epoxies and adhesives have become over the last 20 years. They've really changed the game. And we're going to be talking, like I said, just about epoxies today and what they are. Epoxy basically is a two-part adhesive. It's a hardener and a resin that you mix in equal parts, and that gives you a glue that will stick to so many different surfaces: glass, plastic, wood, metal, everything. Like JB Weld, that's a two-part epoxy, and some epoxies have fillers in it to help it go further or whatnot. But this is your basic epoxy. This here is considered like a paste. These types, PC7, that will become into almost like a putty when you mix it together, but it has the same effect. You mix a part A and a part B together, and it will make it into a hard bonding agent. Now, the ones we're going to use here, we're going to use a two-part clear epoxy. Now, they come in many different brands and styles. The most important thing you'll notice about epoxies is that they have different cure times. This one here that you get at a lot of times at Harbor Freight. This one here sets in 90 seconds. 90 seconds, this will start to get hard. This one here is a 5-minute epoxy. DevCon makes very good epoxies. This one here is a 6-minute epoxy. You can see here, it's already hardened in here. So this was a bad batch, you know, whatever. So that's useless. This one here, 3-hour epoxy, and this one here, 30-minute epoxy. So you say, what's the difference? Well, the longer the cure time, usually the stronger the epoxy. Again, the longer the cure time, the stronger the epoxy, because it takes longer to set up and it becomes a stronger bond. So obviously this 90-second epoxy will be not as strong as a 3-hour epoxy. So depending on the job you're going to use, that's the epoxy you're going to use. Now, depending on how big of a batch you're going to mix, you can use either a small cup or what. I only need a little bit to cover this, so I'm going to only use a card. Some people put 2 pieces of blue tape down and mix it on that, which, you know, you could do. But if you were using a bigger one, you could get these graduated cups. You see they got graduations on here. You could fill it up halfway with one chemical, halfway with the other, and use an ice cream stick to mix it up. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix up here on a piece of paper 2 equal amounts. And the first thing we're going to do, though, is we're going to take a little isopropyl alcohol here. This is 90%. And I'm putting just a little bit on the end of a Q-tip here. And I'm going to clean. You want to make sure your area is always clean. And especially, you know, over here, just wipe it around. The alcohol is actually a thinner for epoxy. So if you get some epoxy on your hands, you got to make sure you wipe it off right away with the alcohol, because you don't want to get this on your hands. You could build up an allergy very quickly. We're going to put 2 areas on. This will dry almost instantaneously, and then I'll show you how we'll mix it together. Okay, here we have 2 equal amounts over here, and we're going to take a little ice cream stick, and we're just going to mix it together, just like this. Now, this is 30-minute epoxy, so that means we got at least 15 minutes of working time before this gets hardened. Whereas if you were working with that 90-second one, you got to work so fast. You know, it's a little bit nerve-wracking to work on that fast, but you just keep mixing. You want to mix it in circles, mix it around, make sure you have it all mixed up, bring it back to the center over here, mix it again. It's important to mix this really well, you know. So take a few seconds, mix it up well. When you're satisfied that everything is mixed in nicely, then you're going to apply it to, what I like to do is apply a little bit to each half and then stick it together. So we'll take some over here like this, and we'll put some on the snap here, like that, okay? And a little bit around. You don't have to worry. Anything, you can always wipe off the excess, but we don't want to glob it on too much, but just enough that we have some on this side, even the leather area, and then we'll put some on the leather patch itself. We're going to do it on the rough side of the patch here. Now, again, you don't want to get this too much on your hands, and if you do, immediately wipe it off with a little paper towel and alcohol. And then we're going to put this on here with a clamp. Clamps are very important. It really helps with the bond. Okay, we clamped it up. We're going to set that aside now and let that just cure. I used a piece of wax paper just to make sure over the leather, to make sure that you don't put a clamp directly on it. You don't want to clamp it and get it stuck to the leather. And over here, I have the stick that I mixed it with. That's going to be my test stick. That will, when that cures, I'll be able to touch this to see if it's cured instead of taking that apart. When that gets hard, that'll be hard. So that's the way you do it. And that's it with the epoxy. Okay, next up, I had so many people ask me about putting an edge on my knife and how I do it and whatnot, and I'm just going to go through it real quick. This is for the absolute beginner, the person that has no idea about sharpening or anything and just wants to get an idea. And I'm going to show you the way I do it, because it's a little bit different than you might see on a lot of other YouTubers. A lot of great videos on how to sharpen, but these guys take it to an extreme, you know. I'm just going to show you the way to get it to do it for field sharpening. Now, one other thing that I forgot to tell you is when you're bushcrafting these days, when you want to go bushcrafting, you have to be able to shave some hair off your arm with your knife. That's an important feature for bushcrafting. But let me just tell you, for the average person, for the 90% of you that might go camping or something like that, I'll tell you the truth right now, you don't want your knife scary sharp, because I'm telling you, if you're going to be using your knife a lot in the field, and if you get it super sharp, you're going to wind up cutting yourself. You're eventually going to touch the blade, or the blade's going to touch you, and you don't want to get cut in the field. You just want it sharp enough to do the job it's meant to do. With me, you want it to be able to cut rope. I don't make feather sticks. I'm against feather sticks. So I don't make feather sticks, but I want to be able to cut rope. I want to do any camp chore I have to do when I'm at camp. I don't want to, do any of the fancy stuff. I don't want to shave my arms. I have razors for that. Anyway, so let's talk about an edge here. I want to put an edge. Abe's wonderful knife. Abe ships them just this way. I believe this is this is like a Scandinavian grind or a saber grind, similar, and he leaves the very tip here, so it's not super sharp. You can see this isn't sharp at all. I can run my finger along it. So we're going to sharpen that up just a little bit. Now, I'm just going to go through real quickly some of the profiles. Now, when you look at these red V's on here, that's as if you were looking at the knife this way. You're looking at the edge of the knife, okay? So think about now, years ago, one of the most common types of grinds for a knife was called a hollow grind. It's called that because it looks like there's a hollow taken out of each side of the knife here, you see? And it gives a very sharp knife. It's a great edge, and very sharp, but it's also a kind of a fragile edge, because you got to remember something. Look at these edges now. As we go down here, you're going to see, how much metal you have supporting it. And, if you tried to use this hollow edge on, let's say, chopping wood, you would roll the edge over or deform the edge. That's what they talk about when they say roll it over. So that is what's called the hollow grind. Next, we have a very popular grind called the Scandinavian. By no means are these all the grinds, but these are very much popular ones. Scandinavian grind is where the blade comes down, and then all of a sudden it'll have a flat angle on each side coming down to a point. That is a very strong, because you can see it's supported by a lot of metal here. It's a very strong, very good. A lot of people love this type of grind on a knife. Next here, we have a convex. Now, I have this a little wide so you can see here, but if you notice, it's a little bit curved on each side. Extremely strong edge over here. And it's also smooth for cutting through certain things. I prefer this edge. This is what you'll find on an axe. You should put this on your axe. You see a lot of guys putting this on their axe. That's not the edge to put on an axe. What happens is the axe will tend to bury itself in the wood. You want this. You want it to chop the wood. Okay? Next, we have what's called a chisel edge. That's where you leave one end of the knife completely flat, and the other end you have a kind of like a Scandinavian grind or something. But one end is beveled, one end and one end is flat. It's very easy to sharpen this type of knife. You don't see them too often, but and because the edge is kind of fragile because it's so thin. This is called a flat grind. That's where it goes from the back of the knife all the way to the tip. One solid straight line, very easy to sharpen, very good design, but it has to be that way when you get the knife. And the last, we're going to talk about a micro bevel. Now, there are a lot of arguments about what a micro bevel is, but basically what it is when any one of these edges, that when it comes down to a point, if it's coming down to the point, the last very bottom, the 1/16 of an inch or something, you put even a sharper point on there to make it a sharper, so it's at the very bottom. It's a secondary bevel, and that's what it varies from person to person on how long this is, whether or not it's part of the bevel. It's crazy, but just so you know, it's what makes a knife sharp to use. And let me tell you what my parameters for a sharp knife. Many times on sharpening videos, you'll see a guy roll his sleeve up. He'll take his knife like this and he'll shave off some hair on his sleeve, okay? And then he'll show you the hair over here, and everybody's, ooh, that's sharp. Yeah, it's sharp. You can make anything scary sharp. You can make any piece. I could take a piece of scrap metal, make it scary sharp. That doesn't mean it's going to hold an edge. The minute, because that edge is so thin, the minute you're in the field doing some work, that edge is going to blunt or chip or whatever because you made it so thin. So it all depends on what you're using it for. Now, if you're going to go skinning deer, you want the sharpest knife. If you ever try to skin an animal with a dull knife, it's horrible. And that's why you need something like a hollow grind or something like that. But if you're going to do any chopping or something, you need something that has more metal behind it, something stronger. I like the convex grind because in my scouting background, if you lent a kid a knife, he'd bring it back. If that You were lucky if it didn't look like a sawtooth edge when they were finished with it. But here's my parameters that I always said for the Scouts. See this? This is that twine you buy at Home Depot. You know, that nylon twine that they give away for tying up packages. Get yourself a couple feet of this, and if you could cut this, you see here? This can't cut it because it's not sharp. Remember, I tell you, Abe ships his knives with this, you know, dulled edge so that you can put your own edge on it and whatever you want. But look, see that? Now, it can't cut it. So that's not a sharp knife. But to me, when you could cut this, that's fine with me, you know. And I don't care if it shaves your arm. I don't care if it slices paper, which obviously this won't. But when you could cut this like this without a lot of effort, that's sharp enough for me. So let's get now. If you ever seen anybody sharpen a knife, this looks like a nice whetstone, like a Japanese whetstone. They put a little water on here, and they lift up the bevel, get the bevel right here, and they put their fingers on the knife, and they gently pull it across the knife like this, and they sharpen. They do a few times on each side, and they switch it, and they do the same thing, raise it up to the bevel, and they bring it across, and it's a beautiful thing to watch. However, this is a piece of corian, although it looks like a whetstone, right? It's actually a piece of corian here, you know, that one of my scraps. So I'm not going to use that. I'm going to show you the way I do it, just to put it's going to be almost just like a secondary bevel on here, because this already has defined bevel, and we're just going to put an edge on here. That's all we want to do. Okay, now this is the edge that I'm looking for, the convex, right? We want it to be curved on each side coming to the middle. Now I have a worn 220 belt on here. And again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the blade here. And again, I'm not going anywhere near this beautiful primary bevel here. I'm just going to put like a micro bevel on the edge. What I'm going to do is when it's running, I'm going to drag it across here like this, then drag it across here like this, until I bring this edge down to a point that makes it sharp enough to cut what I want to cut. So let's go work on that. Now, one thing I want to point out, if you notice that because my belt sander, I removed the platen or the backing behind the belt, you can see that the belt will conform around the blade and give me the convex edge. If I had a platen there, I would get a flat edge, and it would make it more or less like a mini Scandinavian. So that's why I have the platen removed. Now, after you finish with the belt sander, you just take a piece of this is white buffing compound. Just rub a little bit on some cardboard. This is cardboard from a postal priority mailbox. Anything will work. And then just take your knife and strop the edge like this. A couple times back and forth. Just do it like this to clean up the edge, polish up the edge. Couple strokes on each side. And then you'll see it's starting to polish up the edge here, and that's all you need to do. And it's enjoyable, it's easy, and look at that edge. It's not razor sharp. Let's check it out. First, let's take a look at the edge we put on there. Can you see it there? Can you see that secondary micro? You see, and look at that, the shine on there. Look at that, nice, right? But it's still not super thin. That it's not durable. This is a convex edge, and here's the rope check. Okay, we'll turn that across, and we'll give it a pull, and you could see it cuts right through. You know, and this is not easy rope to cut through. You know, by any sense of the means. You know, this rope, you know, it usually takes a little bit to cut through, but you can see here. We have it to the point where it slices through super easy. Will it cut paper? Probably. We have some card stock here, and you can see that it does cut through there. It you know, gives a decent cut. I didn't cut it. I had it mostly. This is my test, my go-to test. Will it cut through easily a piece of twine? And it does, and that's ready to go to the field. The best part is this edge is super strong. And you can bang with this. You can split wood with it. You don't have to worry about damaging it because it's super thin. Okay, in closing, I apologize for the long video today. I was a little bit yappy today. I don't know what happened. I got to start taking some time between dinner and coming down here. Anyway, thanks so much for tuning in. Hope you have a nice day. Take care now. Bye-bye.